Welcome to Leap Leaders Unplugged, where your host, me, Jim Huling, takes you through an exploration of the extraordinary paths of influential leaders and innovators from both the corporate and the nonprofit sectors, who are both making impactful changes and redefining the future of business and beyond. Through these engaging discussions, the podcast seeks to empower you to spark innovation and change in your own organizations or your own career, transcending both financial success to helping you fulfill aspirations for purpose and freedom in all aspects of working life. Whether you're a corporate executive, an inspiring entrepreneur, a nonprofit leader, or an established business owner on a personal quest for self-discovery, Leap Leaders Unplugged provides the motivation, resources, and community to guide your journey. Don't forget to subscribe now and join our movement of visionary leaders who are not only navigating, but actively shaping and hopefully revolutionizing how the world is built. Welcome, everybody, to Leap Leaders Unplugged. I am so excited. I can't even tell you. We were talking before we started recording, and we probably should have recorded some of our conversation, but I'm now going to introduce you to really an extraordinary man, and he's been actually... I just told him today, he's the reason I started this podcast. He influenced me to give my voice in a different way. And, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But with that, that's Jim Huling. Hi, welcome to Leap Leaders Unplugged. I can't wait to hear your journey, a little bit about you. So maybe tell me a little bit about who you are, what you do in the world. We can get the whole understanding who you are.
And I'm so honored to be invited to this. And maybe we should warn your listeners for a moment that we've had a 15 or 20 minute ramp up. And so we're at full voltage now in our conversation. and so, buckle your seatbelt or both hands on the wheel if you're driving the car, because I think we're ready to have a really profound conversation. And I'll start by just saying you and I crossed paths through a program that we were both involved in. And I think it's fair to say we had an instant connection of not only, ideas and intellectual connection, but really a spiritual connection of our purpose and our fulfillment and the things that we're trying to do with our lives and our talents in the world. We were aligned on so many levels that I think we just became instant friends. And for that friendship now to have led us to be on this platform together, it's just the greatest joy. So thank you, my friend, for having me on today.
Oh, thank you. You just were this spark, when I met you last year, that reminded me. You just mirrored back to me. Oh yeah, that's what I want. You were just reminding me the path, because there's a lot of change in my life right now and my career and all my businesses. And you just are this like sort of warm glow of wisdom and moving forward and authenticity. And so I really wanted to hear more about it. So first, let's kind of so people kind of understand. I mean, right now we're just adoring each other, but what I'd love for people to know is you have an extraordinary background. And I really want people to listen to this podcast, because the wisdom that you embark upon, actually very humbly, I think I've even called you out on that a little bit, would be to talk a little bit about your executive coaching business, how you started to be, and with your public speaking. You have an extraordinary book that I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, and how many people that's helped. So go for it. Tell us a little bit about your sort of the highlights of your resume, and then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of the emotional authenticity of how you actually do that. So what you got?
And we both have a lot of pieces of the puzzle to put together. We do that. But for the benefit of your listeners, I'll just say very briefly, my journey in life up to this point really comes down to kind of 4 milestone points. I started my life as a musician. Siobhan, I don't even know if you know this, but I started my first iteration in life was as a musician. And I went to a conservatory school. I graduated with a music degree, and I was sort of on a path and spent some time performing as a professional musician. And then I had an intersection in my life. It's a longer story. We'll see if you want to go there later in the day. But that intersection it forced me to make a choice between the thing I wanted to do for a living and the kind of life I wanted to be able to have. And I think what I just said will probably resonate with a lot of people. We're often faced with the choice of what is the actual thing you want to do for your living, and then what is the actual life doing that thing will enable you to have. And sometimes they don't match up. So I was in one of those places when I was in my early 20s. And so I made a pivot, and I made a pivot from music to business. Can you imagine? And in those days, I pivoted, which makes the second milestone point of technology. I pivoted to technology, which in those days was really still a fledgling industry. There were only a few schools offering degrees. And so I went back to school, got some degrees in computer science, and started a 20-year journey that led me from programmer to CIO of two very large companies here in the U.S., multi-billion-dollar companies. So I made the whole journey all the way to CIO, which took me also naturally in the phase of leadership. You have to be a leader to be a CIO as well as a technologist. And so I learned a lot the hard way about leadership. And I think it's fair to say, although I say it humbly, is that the leadership preparation I got as a CIO set me up for a wonderful opportunity to be CEO of one of the largest technology services companies in America at that time, one of the 20 largest technology services companies in America. And it was a wonderful time. 11 years, I was a CEO of a great company, and I truly enjoyed, every moment of it, which really kind of makes the third point in this story. There's only one left to tell. At the end of 11 years, I came to another crossroads. It's an amazing thing in life. Like when you're driving down the road, you don't think of how often you come to an intersection and you turn left or right. But in life, we come to these intersections and we sometimes lose track that we're actually making choices, that are predefining what future choices will be. And so to say it in a simple way, more if you want to talk about it later, is I really burned out as a CEO. I really moved through stages of joy and fulfillment and achievement all the way to the point when I said, there's got to be something more than this for me. This is not my place anymore. It was for a while, but wasn't at that moment. And so that pivot was, I wanted to be a teacher and an author and a speaker. I wanted to talk about things that I thought really mattered, and I wanted to try to share them in a way that might help other people in the living of their lives. And so I pivoted one more time, and I ended up, by a lot of grace, with the world's greatest training and leadership development company in the world, Franklin Covey. And over time, I rose to be the global managing consultant for Franklin Covey and all of its execution-oriented offerings. And then that, of course, led me this final chapter, Siobhan, I hope, at least I think I'm on, is just a natural extension of that. I'm an executive coach, and I'm taking everything I know about leadership and life and offering it in a one-to-one format with leaders all over the world today. So I hope that wasn't too long, but those 4 milestone points are the interesting but fairly significant journey I made over the last 40 years, from an early musician all the way to being a person who's on your podcast today.
That's interesting. I was a musician, was born into a family of musicians, and I became into corporate, fell into it in sort of a similar way. I was not planning this path at all. So we'll have to talk more about that. I also wanted to ask you the name of your book. So tell us a little bit about your book and what stage did you write that book?
That's right. Well, the book is The 4 Disciplines of Execution, and it's actually been published twice in a first and a second edition. And it's all over the world. It was published first in 2012 and then republished about 3 years ago, a second edition with a lot of new content in it. It's been translated into 16 languages around the world and has been named in many places as one of the 10 best business books of all time. And certainly the biggest selling book in the world on goal setting and execution. So I say all that with great humility, but also with a heart full of thankfulness. What an extraordinary path that led me to partner with two wonderful people, Sean Covey and Chris McChesney, and the three of us together wrote this book and then rewrote a second edition. And if we've watched it be used by leaders all over the world to make a difference. So it's a wonderful part of my story. Thanks for letting me share that part today.
Oh my God, it's extraordinary. And you've been a partial executive coach for me for the last almost 2 years now. And I have to say that some of the things that come from that book have been game-changing tools that I've added to my, daily routine. Like the 3x3s where I write my gratitude lists and the 3 things that I'm going to be excited about today and the 3 things that, what am I officially going to get done today? Not the 20 million things. That you really break things down in this simple way of being able to sort of wrap your head around it and then execute. And that I find, and there is something so special about the way you do things that has heart. And I honestly am a little picky that way. I get to work with some of the best leaders in the world,
Sure.
but very few people bring heart into it. And when someone brings heart and authenticity in a way that sort of combines that, all of a sudden I can hear it. And that is one of the things with you and why I was so excited to have you on this podcast, is I feel like you're really, I know you help so many people in all these different, public speaking things you do. And with the groups, we belong to a lot of the same communities where you speak and support and you do your one-on-one coaching. But I think, the more we can spread this kind of love and kindness in leadership, I think the more people will start to say, oh, I can do that too. And I deserve to be happy and make these transitions too. So, yeah.
And, can I join you in that hope and thought is that if there are people that are going to listen to you and me and be influenced by maybe perhaps some of the things that we say today, if I could pick, this is the one thing I would most hope everybody would take away, that, and I'm older than you, Siobhan, we should say, for anybody who's listening, but I grew up in a time of leadership when leadership was based predominantly on authority. And it was underpinned by a current of fear. So you really had a very simple system. Your boss told you what to do, and if you didn't do it, you didn't have a job anymore, right? So all of the concepts that are so common today about engagement and about fulfillment and about purpose were never discussed in the first 20 years. In fact, I can't imagine going to some of my early bosses and say, I'm really just not too engaged. Can you help me with my engagement? They would say, I would help you find another job. It would have been very simple. But like so many people have pointed out, I think the pandemic really played a part in reshaping our world. And I think there were a lot of people like me who had lived in an authority-based environment who then said, there has to be something more than this. And there has to be a way of doing this where my voice is valued and my vote counts. I don't have to be in charge, but I also don't have to be simply an executor of something someone else thinks I should do. I want to play a role in this. Today we like to talk about ownership, about how do we instill a sense of owning a result in the people that we lead. Well, these were foreign concepts, a number of years ago. And today they're really the centerpiece of where leadership, I think, is going. And I think it all comes down to what you said. When we lead by authority, the very best outcome we will ever get, I think, Siobhan, is compliance. I think when people are afraid enough, they will do whatever we ask them to do. They'll comply, right? Yeah. But the problem with compliance is not that they won't do what you say. They'll do whatever you say for them to do. The problem is that's all they'll do.
Yep.
Because they live in that world, right? But if we can make this switch from compliance over to commitment, if we can lead in such a way that people feel valued and engaged and a significant part of what we're doing, they will become committed. And I'm not just trying to be clever with my words, but closing the gap between compliance and commitment, I think that's the mandate of every leader today. How do I rely less on compliance, and how do I inspire and instill more commitment? And by the way, not just for the people I lead, for myself as well, right? I have a boss, I have a mission, so how do I do that overall? I think that's the new frontier of leadership. And what would have been thought of as soft 10 years ago, soft and nice to do if you have time for things like that kind of stuff, is now considered probably one of the top 2 skills in all of leadership, and particularly in senior leadership. So I think you and I are on this path, and without flattering ourselves too much, I think we were a little ahead of our time because we were people thinking these thoughts before it was popular. But now I think these things you and I believe in, they're very much the mainstream for today.
I agree. I also think that what commitment brings when you have that is innovation. And all the research studies that I see is when people feel like they belong and they matter, they perform 25% better across the board. Doesn't matter what the skill set or the functionality is. And when I work in predominantly inclusion, diversity, equity, and belonging, most people can track the diversity. They can track some sort of element of what is diversely different about their race, gender, ethnicity, or sort of skill set. But it's harder to track, inclusion and belonging and even equity. But I think what you just said is where you start to track that. Because what I started to see in the program I created at Amazon that was called Leap, when you gave people, both the candidates, the tools and resources to advocate for themselves and to have a commitment of oh, I'm stepping into this. I can do this. Here's the tools of how to do this. And then when you gave it to the leaders who were interviewing them, you would see a 35% across the board, no matter what title, what level, what role. Now, I started out with just leaders, but it became where it was across the board for all levels. You saw an increase of 35% on-site to offer success across the board. And then if you added the leaders training and got them committed to be more inclusive and belonging in their communication and how they onboarded people, you saw 57% on-site to offer connect, and I see now, obviously I'm just thinking about this from a talent acquisition perspective and a little bit of that diversity piece. And you also saw that most of these people were diverse. When you started to add more inclusion and belonging, people feel like, oh, I can be seen here. And that can mean a lot of different things for people. But, breaking that down, and you made it very simple. It's really this commitment. And when people feel safe enough, they'll make a commitment. And when they feel like they feel safe enough to make a commitment, they're going to be extraordinarily innovative. They're going to outperform. So a lot of the people who I ran, those stats I just ran, a lot of those, we had 25 to 35% were promoted within a year, which was something that doesn't usually happen at Amazon. It usually takes several years to get promoted. But if they were coming through these programs and these resources where they felt that they could commit, then they were more innovative, then they were promoted more, because it just made everybody feel like, oh, we're involved in this. We're a team together. And I think that emotion, is the piece that I saw that people, this existed before the pandemic, but people saw this necessity that if we don't do this, the company's not going to succeed. The individuals aren't going to succeed. Everybody's just it woke everybody up. And we're having some backlash about it again, but I do think it's going to continue to rise. And I think that's why so many companies are struggling right now, is they're realizing we can't go back to the old way of doing things. And individuals are thinking the same thing. And so I think that's where people like you, who are, our executive coaches, are really kind of in this interesting flux, where you're watching the leaders that you still have in companies and going, you can't do it that way anymore. And then the individuals are coming to you like, I'm going to go start my own business because I can't do it anymore. Right. I think it's a very interesting time I've never seen in the market before. It's a lot of radical change. I think it's all going to be really interesting to see how that lands in the, after 2025. I don't know. I have this feeling about 2025 is sort of going to be this pivotal year where you start to see how that level of commitment, both internally in corporations and nonprofits, as well as individuals, starts to shift. What is your take on that? Because you're really in the belly of the beast. You work with a lot of extraordinary executives who are driving these organizations, as well as the individuals who sort of work in these or work in their own companies as consultants. What is your take on that?
Yeah, my client base at the moment, which is roughly about 35 senior executives, almost all of whom are CEOs or senior vice presidents. Just for people who are listening, they break down basically into two categories. There's a quote unquote younger group who says, I don't understand anything that's going on, and all the people I would normally turn to don't have any answers either. Can you help me, Jim? They're in that category. But there's also a group of people who are very senior, who've been in business a while. Maybe let's say they're 50 plus and they're in very high level positions, who are suddenly finding that everything that worked for them for the last 30 years doesn't work anymore. In fact, it has a counter effect. It's the worst thing you could possibly do, And then and because I'm in the same age bracket, I think they feel safe, as you said, to come to me and say, gosh, Jim, can you help me figure this out? I don't. In fact, some of them, Siobhan, I think it's all right to say, are told to come to me. You need to go see this Jim guy because he will help you demystify why you're failing after 30 years of succeeding. And I say that with great heart, because I care about these people and they don't want to fail, but they find themselves a little bit clueless. But I want to put a small pin in one small thing that you said, because I think you'll love this. Dr. Covey, I spent 14 years in the Franklin Covey organization, so my head is full of things Dr. Covey said, and I'm a better person because of it. but forgive me for dropping one or two of them in our conversation today. But one of the things he said, been hugely impactful on me. He said, no involvement, no commitment. No involvement, no commitment. 4 words that literally revolutionized my thoughts about leadership. Because in the past, it was like we said, it was all about compliance. So there was no expectation that people on the front line would have a vote in a strategic decision. My goodness, you've never heard of anything like that. But then he came along and introduced this idea with people who have no involvement in something are highly unlikely to be committed to it. And so it turns out that it's really as simple as it sounds, that there's a whole segment of the population in any company of any size that has never even had a vote in a decision, whose opinion has never been solicited about a strategic direction, who's never even been in a brainstorming meeting about why our customers are so unhappy, because we still think all the people at the top are the ones that have all the smarts, and the rest of us are supposed to just do what we're told. Well, not only is that a model that doesn't work anymore, it's suboptimal, because people in the front line often have the clearest understanding of what's wrong. The people on the front line have the clearest sense of what we ought to be doing, and if we're losing customers or market share or stock price value, you might not think this is true. Walk the floor and ask people, and you'll get as good an advice as you will from an incredibly expensive consultant much of the time, because the people who are closer to the work have the greatest clarity about how the work should be done. So we're illustrating, you and I think we're doing a good job of illustrating for anybody listening to us that we're in a sea change. The world is changing, and leaders who refuse to adapt, who like the simplicity of the old way, I'm the boss, I tell you what to do, you do what I tell you to do. Anybody who loves that model, you should get out a calendar and circle with a red pen the last day you will be employed, because that's just not how things work anymore. But it shouldn't be the way things work, because people in various levels of every organization are brilliant. They have all kinds of ideas. They have creativity and imagination and passion and enthusiasm. Siobhan, I used to always say that my greatest fear is that everybody who worked for us left 40% of themselves in the car in the parking lot before they came into work. They brought 60% of themselves into the office, but 40% of them sat outside in the car and waited for the day to end so they could come back out and be a whole person again by the time they went home. And it was just a way of trying to illustrate the untapped potential of people whose insight and contribution traditional leadership has never valued. Well, what's now happening is a forcing function, because you know what happens to a brilliant person who never gets asked their opinion and never has any opportunity to contribute? They go work somewhere else.
Yeah, part of
and
them
that's
feels
the best
atrophy.
thing that's happened in a long time.
They also go work somewhere else, but they also, I feel like I've had that, and I feel like a little part of me dies. A little part of me feels unseen and unheard. It feels a little bit like a bad relationship. You feel like a part of you is lost, and am I crazy? Was this just me? I thought I knew what I was doing here, those kinds of things. Now, I know you do a special kind of coaching, which I think I love that you do this. You do I think you call it whole person coaching. And I truly believe, especially in the work that I do, is that most people just want to focus on the skill set when they're hiring in organizations, or even in my nonprofit. You just focus on these basic things that you can checklist. And I really feel like the only time I see organizations or individuals succeed is when they look at the whole, the body, the mind, the spirit, physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual. And spiritual doesn't have to mean religious, but it means that sort of soulful piece of what our purpose is and who we are. And I see when organizations bring that piece of it into that, all of a sudden things start to gel. People are more passionate. You don't see as much turnover. You see the customers happier because the people they're working with are better, the products and innovations that they're creating. So then the company has more revenue. You have more stability. It really does matter how those individuals, to me, that's what inclusion and belonging actually mean. They're terms that you hear in the diversity world a lot, but I think nobody really knows what they mean. And I think the work that you're doing sort of explains that a little bit more. So I'd love for you to talk more about your whole, you call it whole person coaching, right? I think
I do. And I think I invented that name, although, perhaps others say it the same way. But I was always searching for a way to describe where people would asking me, why is your coaching so different? Or I would be humbled by this. Why are you getting results that none of our other coaching experiences have brought to us? And I try to think about, what that was, but I can explain it to you, of course, because you get all of this, but it's so easy. And I'll use an example. When I first became an executive coach, many of the people who came to me for coaching were drawn because of the book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution. So they saw me as someone who could demystify how to produce greater results through the teams they were leading. And, by the way, Sean, there's nothing wrong with that, is there? That's the mission. That's what most people are called to do as an outcome of their leadership. But what was fascinating was within about the first session, we were past topics like goal setting and performance and metrics and scoreboarding. We were past that. And we were down to, do you love what you do? Are you passionate about what you do? Do you believe in what you do? Do the people who follow you feel something, any kind of emotion about what they're doing? Do they take pride in what they're offering? Do they have a sense of ownership in the outcome that's being created? I mean, it doesn't take long, to get past that initial part. So, and I don't know if this comes across right, Sean, but I hope it does, that behind the facade of every senior executive is a real living, breathing human being. And so my coaching gave me the credential of execution to sort of legitimize executive coaching. But the real secret was, most of the time, my greatest impact is on the person behind the execution and why they do it and whether it has purpose and meaning in their lives. And you said this a moment ago, and you said it almost exactly the way I say it. And we've never talked about it before, as far as I can remember, that, you can drive performance in the short term on almost any objective. You can rally people around or have a party or offer a bonus program or whatever you're going to do. You can rally people in the short term. But what you cannot do is sustain that level using those same methods. Only people who feel that there is purpose in their work can sustain work that produces purposeful results. It's the only way to do it. And so the job of leaders in 2024, in my opinion, is to be a thought leader in how every person on the team can feel that what they do matters. I would guarantee you there's not a single person in the world who works joyously all day long at something they believe is completely unimportant. You cannot do it. The human spirit won't do it, right? Even if you do it in the beginning because you want the job or you need the paycheck, you'll lose it after a while. You can't sustain that. It's not a sustainable force. But people who think they're doing something that matters will stay late when it's not called for, will work harder when it's not paid for, will watch over the quality of it like they owned it themselves, and they will do it because they genuinely care about what they're doing. They think it matters. But here's the big reveal of that statement, if you can allow me to put one more thing on it. It's not just how they feel about their work that makes a difference. It's how they feel about their work changes how they feel about themselves. There's a difference between saying, I did work today that made a difference, which in and of itself is a great thing to be able to say, but to then say, I am a person who each and every day makes a difference, leaves a legacy, creates an impact, does things that matter. When you can say those things about yourself and know that they're true, you are transformed. There's no other, I'm sorry to be using big language, but there's no other way to describe it, right? And people who are transformed work in a different way. They change the culture, the tone, the vibrancy of any organization they are. When you talk about it and about the work that you've done, I hear it in your voice and in your words. You've seen this. You've created the same impact. But until you've experienced it, it's a little hard to put words on it. As you know, you've probably tried many times to describe it. But I think that's what you and I are talking about today. How do leaders of 2024 and beyond become instruments of purpose and meaning, along with, at the end of the day, making sure that the job got done? How do we become people who do that? Because the more we do that, a tired expression, but still the right one. We change the world every day by every person that we help to find that sense of meaning and purpose in their own work.
It's so true. I think of my own life, like, um, I can get, I can want to start a revolution at any minute. If I see injustice, I want to call it out. And it's very challenging for me to work in the corporate space. I'm not going to lie. Like, I see injustice, or I see people not taking care of themselves or not taking care of their staff or their teams. And I want to, like, rise up and we, but what I found is ways to, so I asked myself, okay, revolutionizing things, I can do that, but can I do it through kindness? And how would the ideal woman do that? And so I have this sort of vision of how the ideal woman would move through the world. I don't always live up to it, but it feels so good at the end of the day when I look at the complicated politics or drama that I, endured a day, and I stayed steadfast in purpose, and I didn't let the tides or the boats or the tankers coming at me, get to me. And I think that's those tools that you teach, and I think they make a big difference. I mean, even the work I do in my nonprofit, I don't even know what drives me to do that. I don't make money from it. I don't get fame for it. There's never enough money hardly to pay to make sure. Those of you listening who don't know what I do, I also have a nonprofit called One Mama that helps impoverished women have babies safely in sub-Saharan Africa. I've been doing it since 2008. I usually get malaria. I get very sick. It's a lot of work, and I always do it on top of my normal consulting for the corporate world. But there's this driving thing of, like, I don't see anyone else stepping up to do this, and I feel like it's important that I feel like the universe had me be a caretaker of this vision. And when that's done, the universe will tell me that it's time to stop. But right now, I'm the caretaker of this vision, and I think that I have to do my marching orders whatever day they are. And I think everybody has is like sort of the caretaker of whatever the vision or the purpose that is empowered in you. And I usually find that has come from when people ask me, well, how do I start a nonprofit, or how do I do that in this work? I was like, actually go to the dark places in your life. Usually when we transmute those into something, like, I've always felt like I didn't fit in. I always felt like I didn't really belong in corporate, or I felt like people didn't understand me, or I was too emotional, or thought too differently. Then I started to make sort of tools and resources to help transmute that. And then that ended up being my superpower. And that ended up being how One Mom got started. Was I lost a baby, and I was like, well, what are we going to do with that? And it's like, oh, be of service. Be of service in the very thing that I can't do. Be of service in the same thing in the corporate world, in the way that I felt like maybe I shouldn't be doing, or I can't do it. Or, like, I find our purpose comes in these unique, dark moments. I think you've mentioned it too. I wanted to talk about is, like, about every 4 to 5 years, all my businesses change, move, mutate. I change, my purpose changes. But at the bottom of the day, the purpose stays somewhat the same. I'm always want to empower myself and individuals to be their best selves. And through my own actions, and then giving them tools and resources to do that, whether it's a company or individuals. And it seems like that's pretty much your specialty, doing that.
Well, thank you. What a compliment. Thank you.
I mean, you really made a difference. Last year was, we all go through dark nights of the soul. And every time I go through a dark night of the soul, all of a sudden a new rebirth happens on the other side of that. But when you're in the dark night of the soul, you're like, oh my gosh, why am I here again? Right? Like, why am I at this job? Why am I, in this situation between jobs? Why am I in this? Why am I that? But every time, if I'm quiet, and I met you in a moment of my dark night of the soul, and, your sweet voice was like, no, you've got this. You already have the wisdom. You already know this. And you gave me a bunch of those tools.
You're so kind. What a kind remembrance of me. And I'm so glad that, gosh, you have never said those words to me in that way. And I'm a little emotional right now. So thank you. Thank you for saying that. Because if that were true, I would have said in that moment, I am on purpose. I fulfilled what I think I'm here to do, what I think I was brought here to do. But to broaden the discussion just a bit from me is to say, I think everybody is here to do something. I think everybody, and I know we're in corporate America, we're very frightened of mystical or pseudo-spiritual language. It just frightens everybody to death. And I get it that it could be misused or misconstrued. I get it. If anybody's listening to this now, don't be offended. Let us just use some words that are the best words we have for today. But I think, frankly, everybody has a calling. I think everybody is called to do something. And in the course of a lifetime, we may be called to do several things. We don't get just one turn, we may get several opportunities to do and become all that we were really created to be. And so I think of it, Siobhan, you've heard me use this metaphor before, that it's like you have an inner blueprint inside you. And every minute of every day when you are acting and working and living according to that blueprint, that thing that calls you, you have peace and joy. And you can feel it, even if times are good or times are bad. It's like you have a guide, a through line to the next place, because what you're about, what you're doing is on purpose, right? And when you don't have that, you're very much wandering in the woods. You're just hoping, And I want to say this so carefully, Siobhan. A lot of people, their place in the world is one where they feel they just trade hours for dollars. And they might say, Jim and Siobhan, I'm on this podcast. You guys are on another planet. I start at 8, I get off at 5, I collect my check and I go home. And that's when my life begins, is when the day is over and I get to go back to my family. Maybe that's right. And I would say trading hours for dollars, no matter where you are, is an honorable thing to do, especially if that's how you support your family and the people you care about and the world that you live in. No problem. But I would want everybody also to know that I believe with all my heart that there is a calling for all of us, for each one of us. And that even if I'm in a place where I can squeeze out 45 minutes a week to do something other than what I do to survive, that 45 minutes can become the richest, most fulfilling part of your entire week, and can lead you to something that one day you may look back and say, this made all the difference. And by the way, let's be careful. Maybe that means you're going to be the world's greatest parent. Maybe that means you're going to show up for a person in poor health who needs some simple kind of support. Maybe you're going to invent something or design something or paint something. Maybe you're going to bake the world's greatest bread. I don't know. But I know that we all feel that calling. And if I ever think about, what is my job now as an executive coach? And I'll be interested to see how you react to this. Sometimes I think it is simply to wake up that calling. I have a little methodology for how you wake up your calling.
Oh,
and
I want to do
I
this.
just take people through this so simply, and there's no genius on my part. And I'm not presenting myself today as the purpose guru. I'm not that guy. But what I do have is a kind of simple roadmap for how you figure out what's calling to you. And then as soon as we get people on that path, we watch their lives change by the day, not by the year, by the day. We can see people transform, because it lights you up from the inside. So I think this is all the topic of leadership for the new era. I think everything we're talking about today, if the world goes in the way that I hope it will go, this is what will be in the textbooks. And there will be other textbooks about P&L and profitability and operational excellence and all that. We need all those things. Yes. But the added textbooks will be the ones about engagement and heart and purpose. I think you and I are calling out to the next wave of leadership insight. I think that's what we're feeling is coming, and we're trying to be a part of helping people get there.
Yeah, I feel like we really are. And I've been a consultant for a very long time, but I feel I'm on a new mission to go and really build out talent frameworks that build these fundamental things that are, most people separate their leadership development, their talent acquisition, their inclusion, diversity, equity, belonging, their HR, like everything's just segmented out. But if you can make the company's core values included in sort of their people with these core values and what I call these talent frameworks, and build these as like anchors into the company values, there's no way you can't have more innovation. Your customers are happy. You drive more revenue. I've proven it in many startups, right? And I've proven it in even little divisions, or large divisions of Amazon. If you pull these things together and you do them consistently, you can create change. But just like, most change, like with, a lot of times when people do diets or when they change their relationship issues, they do well, and then they get scared when things start feeling peaceful. So I do also think that part of our training as well, or how we help coach others, is also helping them let it land. So teaching corporations, like right now, I'm seeing this huge backlash. They learned a lot during the pandemic about really inclusion and belonging. I just saw this huge trend of conversations that I had never seen in corporate before that were just extraordinary. And race and gender and disability, like everybody was feeling like they could have a voice and heard and seen, and there was all this innovation around it. And then all of a sudden, everybody got scared, and there's that retreat where, like the waves of the ocean, we're retreating right back. And I think what I also realized through this process is that, you also have to teach the cycles. That even though you're scared and you want to clench and you want to go ahead and lay off these people that you just coached for 3 years and got them to this like successful place, like I don't really understand this concept, and now you're going to rehire them again in a year, like thinking through the bigger picture. Like, don't do these knee-jerk reactions, whether you're the corporation or as the individual. And for me as an individual, am I living by my values? Like you said something that made me think of, like, I've had to work a job where you work, to pay the bills. And I was like, well, this isn't what I want to do. So how do I find value in this? And what I started doing is, how can I connect to the spirit or the joy in this other person, in the individuals in the job, or where can I bring? And so I was like, well, I don't really believe in this company's values. I don't really believe in anything that they're doing. I'm thinking of one particular company that I'm not going to say. But all of a sudden, I started can I be sunshine? Can I just connect with people and bring emotional intelligence to the conversation at every meeting I'm at? And all of a sudden, this job that I truly hated, I've started to feel like I could add value. And it's part of those same types of techniques that you're talking about, of where you're bringing value, and it's like, am I living by my values? And how do I hold that space even in an organization or a situation where we're all going to be in situations where, finances are a situation and you're like, we get into the stress, but how do I not let that stress take away the value or what I think of my own purpose? And I think companies are coming.
It's really true that the two worst things a human being can ever say is, number one, what I do doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And number two, I don't matter. Those are the bottom two rungs of any ladder on any continuum you can find in the human experience. And the last one is a deadly one, of course, that can carry frightening consequences. Well, who has more influence? Now, we're not talking about whose responsibility it is. Everybody should work on finding their own place and evolving in their own way, but also organizations who are responsible for people should be playing a part in this as well. So who has more influence over those two questions? What I do matters, and ultimately I matter, or the worst version is what I do doesn't matter, and therefore I don't matter. Who has more influence over that? Well, the leaders that you're in front of 40 to 50 to 60 hours a week are the people who have a greatest chance to change how you think about that. Mm-hmm. So if the leaders themselves could become people of purpose, I think we could engineer a downward revolution where the people who follow them could become people of purpose. But I want to be really quick to say, I think it could work the other way as well. I think in many ways it is starting to work the other way.
I think you're right.
Where the frontline people of an organization are suddenly realizing, and I'm going to say this with some humor, but they hold all the power. I said to one of my clients recently, big corporation, one of the largest corporations in America, I said, if you think leadership do all the executing, send everybody home for a week and see how many products get manufactured. Just send them all home. And I mean, literally, you could see the blood leave their faces, but there is this tendency to say, we are the geniuses in the mothership, and all the rest of you follow the lead that we set. And, maybe there's some parts of that are appropriate. But what that The problem that creates is this undervaluing of the contribution of the individual on the front line. And I think it's the greatest untapped opportunity in the world, frankly. Like the numbers you quote, 35%, 40% increase in productivity. Nobody gets those kinds of numbers casually or fast. And yet you've had experiments and real experiences where you've seen significant changes happen in a relatively short period of time. Well, I think this is what we ought to be getting excited about nowadays. This is what we ought to be looking toward as the next revolution in leadership, at least, and maybe in all of humanity. Maybe what if we all became people of purpose? What if we all felt that what I do today matters, and the way I do it matters, and if I phone it in, that matters, and if I bring excellence to it, that matters? What if we could become people who really believed that we were an important part of the process? I think it would revolutionize everything. And it is, so far in my experience, a largely untapped characteristic of how organizations are run.
I agree. I saw this some little clip this morning about a gentleman talking about a research project where they took all these leaders that were, I don't know, in their 60s or 70s, and they, for 5 days, said, I want you to think that you're 20 years younger. So they put pictures of all the different times and all these happy moments in their life, and they put them all over the wall for these 5 days, and they didn't have access to anything else except for these pictures and memories of that. And so they, all of a sudden, they were off canes, they were off their meds, they were tested their actual physical measurements, and they tested their physical measurements after the 5 days of all of this interaction of acting like they were 20 years younger. And so much is in our mind. Our mind is one of the most powerful tools that we have. I mean, part of how I became a recruiter is I was bedridden. I couldn't perform music anymore, which is where we have a similar comment. It's like, so I couldn't get on stage. I couldn't wait tables anymore. And I somehow started on a phone and started recruiting and changed my mind around. And with that, started to heal my body and started to see myself through a different lens. And I believe my body miraculously healed. I use the word miracle a lot because sometimes there's just things you can't really explain. And I don't really mean it as a religious experience, but it's like, oh my God, how did that happen? And I think I've seen that with people where I'm coaching them and they don't believe in themselves. And I know I've watched you coach. We were in this group coaching thing, and I'd watch you coach somebody and they just completely did not believe in themselves. And then all of a sudden, by the time you're done with them, they're like, yeah, I can do it. And their faces changed and they look 10 years younger. And I was like, you really do see how powerful the mind is. And I created a course called Fighting for Your Joy. And most people are like, why do you say fighting? And I was like, well, I came from a pretty hard background. My brain wants to always look at the worst of everything. And so I'm always having to fight for joy. I'm always having to basically turn the Titanic around and get it back to think about joy. And I feel like your tools, the way that you coach people is sort of that same kind of thing of, okay, you think it's this, but let's bring you back to joy. Let's bring you back to actually what your purpose is or what's important to you, instead of the intellectual pieces that you think are important to you. And I think those things can actually change our chemistry, our physical, emotional, psychological, beings in such a way that then we can transform corporations or companies or our individual lives as well.
Yeah, I've heard it said many times that if we could truly understand the power of our own thoughts, we would be frightened to death by how powerful they are, and then how unbridled they are for most of the time. But I think I know one of the phrases you're thinking about, and it's been a phrase I've been using the last 2 or 3 years, and I'm actually stunned by the kind of impact it seems to have on people. And without building it up too much, I'll say it now, and you've heard me say this many times, is I'm coming to the realization at this stage that joy is a valid compass. And I want to quickly come behind that and say, I was raised to think about lots of other compasses: success, income, achievement, performance, recognition, promotion, accomplishments. I was raised to think about all of those things, and they were the things of that time. But never once did anybody say, hey, why don't you make the next career change based on joy? Why don't you choose the next job where one of your 4 major decision criteria is joy. Not can I be happy doing it? That's a very low level question. Will doing it bring me joy? Will I feel joy every morning when I get up to go in? And believe me, I know all the people that are listening to your podcast, driving their car, rolling their eyes, like, yeah, right, two people on a podcast, but I want to tell you that it is absolutely possible, but it has to start by saying joy is a valid compass. All the other things we do, pro-con lists, my clients will come to me, Siobhan, you wouldn't believe, when they've got a decision to make, they'll have 9 pages of analytics. And so decision option 1, 2, 3, and 4, but then there's 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, then there's 2B sub C. I've got all, and literally I feel like my head's about to explode. And they do look at me strangely when I first say to them, after a dramatic pause to get their mind to quiet, of all the options you've thought about, which one brings you joy? And in that moment, and I'm not saying that I'm the profound influence, the question is the profound influence, because I realize in that moment, that particular question has never entered their mind.
Yeah.
Because we're not trained for it.
It's not I can't think of any country that's really in the culture to do that. I mean, I'm sure there are places, but I don't know of any. And most people I work with, most international companies and, from people all over the world. And most people are driven by all these sort of external versions of success. And I do know that for my personal health and my mental health really changed when I made that, basically asked that question in my own way of, what's going to bring me joy? What am I here to do? What is my actual purpose and what brings me joy? And and then when I took action on that, that's when everything changed for me. And it was kind of later in life. And all of a sudden, kind of the door opened for One Mama and the door opened for the different kind of consulting. And not that I wasn't doing some of these kinds of things, but something just changed. And then you and I had talked a little bit before we started recording the podcast, but I also feel like like you said, I think I don't even know how to say it. Those outward successes that we feel like we're supposed to tick off, right? The fame, the success, the salaries, the status, the titles, the house, all of these very like checklist things that if I have these things, I'll be successful. And I think with the question you just asked is actually, if I'm joyful and then I add those things, it's a different kind of success. Exactly. And that has really changed everything, knowing that.
So well said. And isn't it a paradox, Siobhan? We optimize for everything else. When we're making choices about our lives, we optimize for income. We optimize for location. We optimize for achievement and promotion. Heck, I know people who optimize for commute time. We optimize toward everything else and yet never get to the thing that really makes all the difference. Because 6 months into the new job, no matter what your compensation is, no matter what your title is, no matter what your office is, or no matter what, if you still have one, your commute is, will all be secondary to the question, am I happy to come to this job every day? Do I feel joy in the work that I do? Because joy is the sustaining element of any aspect of human performance. Now, we're not talking about, zippity-doo-dah, smile on your face, skipping down the hallway, going to a meeting. I'm not trying to say that, but I'm trying to say I'm going to a meeting and I think, I'm really glad I'm going to this meeting because we're going to do something that really matters. And I'm going to be with people that I respect and trust. And together we're going to find a better answer than any one of us could alone. And when we're finished, we're not only going to help our company, we're going to be a group of people who feel more connected to each other. I mean, I could go on and on, but you're walking down the hallway to the meeting. Do you ever think all those thoughts? No, we don't. But it's because at the root of it, we didn't choose joy in the job we took. We didn't optimize for joy. And I may sound like an older guy, Siobhan. I am an older guy, so why shouldn't I sound like one? But I would tell you this as the absolute truth. Success will only take you so far.
So true.
Success feels like forever, but it will not. Success will only take you so far. And there comes a moment when the success bridge is out, and the only alternate bridge is significance. So if you want to keep going, you have to switch lanes. You have to be driven and energized and validated by something other than material success. And for most people, the best word for that is significance. So when I move over to significance, now I don't care what my title is. Now I'll always care whether I get fairly compensated for what I'm doing, but I'm not measuring myself by whether I got a 15% increase every year anymore as well, right? And I don't have to have a private parking place or a special badge, or I don't have anything, because I know that what I'm doing is really making a difference. So look at me, for example. I was the global managing consultant for what I believe is the finest company to ever exist on the world for 14 years. And now I sit in my home and coach people over Zoom, right? So it's easy for me to think I am in the downward phase of my life. And yet it's not the truth. I say, again, with great humility, I'm still living in crescendo. I haven't crescendoed yet, because now I'm helping people intimately, one-on-one, to wrestle with things that they would never even reveal in public. Senior leaders with challenging decisions to make, all of that. So who can? I haven't even peaked yet, right? But had I not made the significant change, the change from success to significance, I wouldn't have that understanding, nor would I come to this work with the right mindset if I hadn't understood that.
That's amazing. It's so beautiful. And I think that is where we follow our journey. I do find when people get trapped, when I coach them from their careers, or even when I'm internally in a company, people want things to keep going the same way. That's not really how life is. We really do need to find the rhythm of our self as individuals, as well as the rhythm of a company. That's the nature of everything changes. And that control of trying to keep things the same is where I think, lose a lot of that joy or that significance. And I know I was doing all these things to try to make One Mama, well known, so it could get funding. And so I was putting myself out there on the, kind of on the celebrity track, or the notoriety track, and going to have my story in a movie and all of that stuff. And all of a sudden, I started having these sort of signals of like, this isn't going to bring you joy. Sure, this looks like success, but it was causing more and more chaos in my life, that in a way I was like, I don't think this is worth this. And I'm so grateful that I somehow stepped back from the fame path and all of that, because I realized I now have this extraordinary relationship with my partner. I have extraordinary friends. I now know who my friends are, right? Like when I started having more of a public life, people would ask me questions in a certain way, and I knew they didn't really want to be my friend, or they wanted to know, the celebrity that I had talked to, or they'd seen a picture with me with recently. And like, that stuff is like, oh, wow, I'm losing access to my own personal significance and joy about what's internally mine, and letting the world start to determine what my joy will look like, or what my significance will be. And I was like, I don't think this is going to work. And before that, that was happening before I met my husband. And I do believe if I'd gone down that other path, I wouldn't been able to attract the extraordinary man that I have married. And because you just start to lose yourself in that stuff. And I can see the same thing in the corporate world, working for companies like Amazon and Google. It's not fame, but it's a level of heightened esteem. I don't know. Like, if you work for those name brand companies, you feel like you are something, and you have to stay at this pace, and you have to be and look and do a certain thing. And sometimes you can start to, I noticed I started to lose some of my values, my own personal values, as I was doing that, of like, okay, wait a second, I'm losing focus on joy. I'm losing focus on what's actually mine. And I think that's one of those questions that I think you really are great at helping people find.
Oh, thank you. I hope so, because can there be a question that matters more than that? And I was with a client yesterday. I hope this is all right if I share this small vignette.
Yes,
And I said to him, very senior executive, CEO of a very large corporation. If I said the name of the company, you would know the CEO. Is that kind of notoriety and visibility.
Mm.
And we were very deep into the fundamental question of, why am I not happy? I have everything, I'm rich and I have a great family and then we're all healthy, blah, 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 blah. He had a long gratitude list, as you and I would say, but was deeply, deeply unhappy. And the best moment of our time together came down to this one question of, are you working to sustain your image, or are you working to create your identity?
Mm.
Now, for him, that landed hard. And I think it landed, it's not often you see a late 50s, very public CEO with a tear or two, not weeping, but a tear or two streaming down the face. But I think that question landed hard because that was the truth. The truth was, without really realizing it, small decision by small decision by small decision, he had become a person who was investing a lot of energy in sustaining a particular image and was no longer really forging the thing that lasts, his true identity, his true core of who he was. And once we had that moment of truth, everything after that became easy. I mean, there are many ways to operationalize how to get back on the right path. That's not even really the hard part. The hard part that I see people face is the realization that they're on the wrong path. That's what's hard to accept, and I don't know if there are 5 stages of grief, and one of them is denial about, I've got them on the wrong path. I don't know, but I do witness people resisting the realization that they're on the wrong path and they've been on it for quite a while. And I don't know really why that is, because once you accept that realization, you now step over onto the path of joy, and then everything gets easier after that. I don't know, but I'm wondering a thing out loud, and I'm freelancing only for a moment. I hope it'll be all right with you.
No, go for it.
I wonder if in our discussion, anyone who's listening to us would think, I hope perhaps would feel they've gotten some very valuable insights and concepts, but about at this moment would be saying, could you please tell me the steps? What, in other words, what do I do with everything that you've said? Are you feeling that too? That like you and I, we need to not finish without that.
I was totally just about to ask you, what's your personal daily routine that helps you have this? I think we were both talking about this before we got on the thing. So you just were right in my vein of this conversation.
As usual, we're in the same sort of flow, I think. So if I may, I'd like to offer 2 thoughts. Maybe between them, they'll help everybody who's listening to us. So one of them is, if you have no idea what your purpose is, what do I do? And then I'd love to finish with the daily routine. So thank you for that. I'll only take a moment, but this bigger question a little bit is, okay, Jim, I'm on my way home from work. I love listening to you and Siobhan. You guys have so much energy and vitality, and I'd like a full dose of that, please. How do I get it? And I think the starting point is to do some work around, why am I here? What was I born to do? What is my unique contribution to the world and to the universe in terms of my life? And I work, Siobhan, with 4 questions that seem to help people. I hope you won't mind if I just say them very quickly.
Oh, please do.
The first one is an introspective question, which really just means before we can go forward, it's valuable to look backward. So I like for everybody to start by sort of making a personal highlight reel. When have you felt purposeful? In what moments in your life have you had this experience where you were doing the right thing and you were doing it in the right way and things were flowing? When have you had those moments? And my personal checklist, Siobhan, if it's all right, I hope it's helpful. Things like this help me. Is I have 5 rights. I have 5 things that you're looking for to check the box. Are you when are those moments when you were the right person, doing the right thing, in the right way, with the right people, for the right reasons? So if you can check those 5 boxes, you're the right person, doing the right thing, in the right way, with the right people, for the right reasons. Check, 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 check. You're likely remembering what was a peak moment in your life in terms of purpose. And all of those moments that you can remember, whether it was the time you gave the speech, or the time you solved the problem, or the time you counseled a person who was in trouble, or the time you had an idea for a new product launch or a strategic direction change. It doesn't matter what you were doing. What matters was, could you check those 5 boxes? The collection of those things is full of clues about what your purpose is, because those moments are whispers from the universe. It's like the first time I ever gave a speech, I swear I felt it. Somebody said, "This is what you're supposed to be doing." It was, I could just hear it, and I got chill bumps just telling you that story. But I mean, I had a visceral experience, and I think everybody will. So step 1, only 4 things to say, is identify the moments when you have been filled with purpose. So we call those purposeful moments. Number 2, identify who you feel called to help. Now, I love the second question, because this is really the humility question. The answering this question keeps it from being all about you. How can I get more, do more, be more, have more? It keeps us out of that realm when we say, how can I be of service? And the way to think about it, I think, is to personalize it. So who do I look at you? You are called to serve the women who benefit from One Mama. You're so called to it that you sacrifice personally in order to be able to do it. That's the strength of your calling on that. You're supposed to be doing that work, right? Which you don't need me to tell you, but you know that that's true. So the second thing I like to suggest people think about is, if you could help anybody in the world, who would you most want to help? Do you light up when you're helping young people? Do you light up when you're helping people over 50 in the midlife crisis? Do you light up when you're helping people through a nonprofit, or who are impoverished or facing difficult circumstances? What is it that you want to do? If you could choose who your people are, who would your people be? That's the second. Third, I'm trying to finish up quickly, because I have a tendency to go long on these kinds of things. Third question is, what do you bring? So now here's real humility. Let's inventory the things you bring. Do you have an ability to speak, or to write, or to paint? Can you build, or manufacture, or bake, or grow? Or what do you bring to the table for those people that you just got through saying you would most like to help? So the inventorying of what do I bring? And then the last question of all, and the one that matters most, honestly, in my opinion, is, what impact do you want to have? You've heard me say this before, Siobhan, in our times together, but I was so moved by Steve Jobs' quote, which I always butcher when I'm trying to quote it back. But he said basically, live your life in such a way that you make a dent in the universe. The moment I heard that phrase, dent in the universe, that captured me, because I loved the tangibility of that. One day you and I might stand side by side somewhere, and I could point my finger and say, "Hey, Siobhan, look over there. You see that dent? That was mine. That's what I did. I did that with my life. I used my life in that way." I love that feeling of that quote. So I'm not trying to sell everybody on the quote. I'm trying to sell them on the idea that Dr. Covey started us all saying, begin with the end in mind. So question number 4 is, what impact do you want to end up having created? If you take those 4 questions, sorry, I had to say them so quickly, you really have a starter set for saying, okay, I know what my purpose is. In fact, Siobhan, everybody I've ever taken through those 4 questions has come out of the discussion saying, okay, I may not know everything, but I know which direction to be going. I'm going northeast, because I know that's where my purpose lies. And from that moment forward, as we said a moment ago, they're on the new path. They're on the path of purpose and significance. And it begins to change their lives in a way that they can't even imagine in the beginning. There's a reason that The Purpose-Driven Life is the best-selling book in the history of the world. There's a reason for that, because we're all hungry for purpose. We're all hungry for direction. We all want to have a lighthouse on the hill that guides us at night, so we keep walking in the right way. We all want that. Well, this is the tangible, tactical way you can get started to build your own sense of purpose and direction. Just those 4 simple questions.
That's so beautiful. I'm so glad you went through that. And, my own personal experience of that, being, a nonprofit leader, and, for that time where I was sort of in a much more public place and public speaking more than I used to, than I do now. But people would always ask me, how do I start my own nonprofit, right? How do I do what you're doing? How did you find your purpose? And what I found was I definitely went through each of those steps, but I'm a very emotional, sensitive person. And what I find is if I can find the emotion in me with each of those steps that you just laid out, like there's always moments, sometimes when you look at a sunset and your body just has a sense of knowing. There's that moment when, and most of my moments of knowing came from a crisis. Like for me, losing the baby, and I was like, I got to go be of service and help others. I didn't know I was going to go to Africa and all of a sudden be with a vision to come and start a birthing center, which all sort of fits well into the archetype of a storyline for a movie. But that wasn't my purpose. And I didn't even realize that until years later, honestly, is that usually the problem that we have, we want a solution that we've had in our own life. We've figured out a solution, and now we want to go tell other people what that solution is. So I usually say, go find the darker moments in your life, the places where you've really struggled, and then all of a sudden you help somebody, or like one guy said he broke his leg and then he started helping people go nowhere to get crutches, right? Like it could be so simple as whatever the problem is, but usually we feel this sense of like, yeah, I know this. I have this sense in my body that I know this. And all the things that most people told me were too much, my emotions, my intuition, I have a quirky personality, which definitely didn't fit very well into the corporate world. I was really supposed to be a front stage performer, like a musician. I wasn't really planning to be running divisions of, companies at Amazon, right? But I think what I started when things turned around is when I stepped into my authentic self. And when I said, what am I here? I changed my model of, okay, I'm at these companies. What can I bring? And I don't know if you'll notice, but in all my logos, both not just with the Leaders Unplugged, but even my Fighting for Joy and some of the One Mama stuff, you'll notice there's always sun rays. And so like yours is making a dent. I want to make sure that I am a full sun ray, like full, like embodied in my own bubble of my own version of being my own sun. And that my rays will help light up others. And that's really, and if my sun is dim, if I'm not eating correctly, if I'm not taking care of my body, if I'm not meditating, if I'm not taking care of this very sensitive, emotional body, then I can't actually be this ray of sunshine that sort of shines and lets the universe sort of guide me what my marching orders are of what's the next right thing in front of me. And there's a knowing. I think when we are in our purpose, there is a knowing. And again, I'm not talking in any kind of religious thing. I really, my spirituality is really based on sort of nature. I think that I can feel it in the sunlight and in the ocean. And like, there's this, but all of us, whenever I tell somebody to put their hand on their heart and close their eyes, and I ask them to do very similar questions that you just said, they always know. Yeah. Even when they're in the most insane situations, if they can get out of their head and drop down into their body, there is a knowing of what they really want to do and where they want to go. And again, they might not have all the details, but there's, like you said, the compass is starting to now point. And I know I've had to do it, like I said, about every 4 or 5 years. I always have to repivot my, okay, what is purpose telling me now? Where am I going now? What's the compass telling me now?
Yeah, and it's not a vending machine, right? Like I need a purpose. You drop a quarter in, pull the handle, and boom, there's your purpose. Because purpose is an evolving thing as our life evolves, But the one thing I'm 100% sure of, and I hope I say it well, is the things though that move you, the things that excite you, the things that light you up, those are not random. Those are not random occurrences. They are glimpses of who you came here to be. And the greatest tragedy we ever do is we ignore those things. We're like people driving a car at 90 miles an hour down the road and we miss the signs. But the truth is there are signs everywhere. And most of it, you said this beautifully just now, can be discerned through the body much more easily than through the mind. Have you ever heard anybody say the longest journey we ever take is 12 inches? And it's the distance from the mind to the heart. I think there's a lot of truth in that, in that phrase. And so we're still just talking about how you get there. But I think people who find themselves in a quandary can do what you said. They can slow down, they can center themselves, and they can become observers of their own spirit. So what am I doing when my spirit rises? And what am I doing when my spirit plummets? What am I doing as an act of will? And what am I doing because I can't not do it? Those questions are just ways of observing the thing that's happening all around you. So the things that move you are not random. They're whispers from your soul of what we're here to do. And most of the time, my soul is telling me, Jim, we need to get back to work. We need to get busier. We have more to do on this earth than we've done so far. And that feeling of being on purpose was right where we started our conversation today. I think that's the most powerful feeling in the world. When you know what you were born to do, or all the things you were born to do, can include being a great parent and a great friend and a great sister and brother, as well as many professions. From that day forward, we have a kind of peace that you can never get externally. You can never get this kind of peace outside in, like successful enough, beautiful car, beautiful home, as you said a minute ago, all these things, in other words, make the outside so beautiful that the inside will be vibrant. It doesn't work that way. But you can make the inside so vibrant that it doesn't really matter so much what the outside is. It's an inside out. What you and I've been talking about for over an hour is an inside out way of living your life and doing what you feel you came here to do. And we've talked about it in the corporate world. We've talked about it as a leadership capability. We've talked about it in terms of nonprofits, and we've talked about it on a personal level, how you make these things happen. I think without having planned it, we've actually touched all the bases of our core theme, which is, how do I live a life that matters? And if, to the greatest ability I have, how do I enable other people to feel that they too are living a life that matters? How do I do that? If I do that, most of the other things in the world will sort themselves out, because we'll always be coming from that place.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think what you remind me too is that, like, when I founded One Mama, I remember I used to watch Oprah and I would cry going, I don't know what my purpose is. I'd watch her do the Angel Network and I'd be like, I don't know my purpose. I'm never going to have a purpose. Right. And then all of a sudden I founded One Mama and I'm doing this incredible, extraordinary, moving work. Very hard, but I knew I was on purpose. But as I've been doing this for 18 years, that has changed. Right. And even my purpose and how the work of moving, I built the LEAP program at Amazon, where I really was moving the needle of change and bringing more voices of diversity and inclusion and belonging in one of the most powerful companies in the world. I really felt like I was doing what I was doing with One Mama. But what's interesting is all those things change and then they don't have the same face. But so then I can get lost. It's easy in my head. I get lost and it's like, no, you're still. So what I do now, and actually you helped, I use one of your tools to do this, is I refocus daily. What's my purpose? And my purpose isn't about One Mama or my consulting business, or my purpose is to make sure I'm listening today to see how to be of service, to help people empower themselves with tools and resources that are I'm inspired to share. Like, I don't know always what those tools are going to look like. I don't know like what One Mama is going to look like. Maybe One Mama won't be the thing anymore. Like, now I'm realizing it's not the vehicle. I think we talked about this, right? It's the movement. It's the service. And what I feel like this is where I'm like, oh, I think I'm actually learning to be a little bit wiser. Is that, like, I felt like purpose had this, like, it's One Mama and I'm saving lives. And it's this very linear thing. And what I'm seeing is, no, I feel like the universe moves me around like a chess piece and say, nope, today we want you over here. Nope, today we want you over here. Yeah, you thought you were doing this, but nope, we're going to have you be of service this way today. And if I can just stay grounded and really fight for my joy and, be centered in my joy and service, the world, like this year, all 5 of my businesses have been topsy-turvy, just completely radically changing. My whole industry is radically changing. And so it's been like, okay, universe, show me what this looks like. And all of a sudden in the last month or two, I can see, oh, it's back to the current. Okay, I just had to stay focused on this, and the outward look looks different, but the purpose is actually still the same, if that makes any sense. I don't know if I was rambling there a little bit, but I feel like you really helps me see that when we were talking about your journey and your career too, is that it doesn't always look like the CEO of the company, or that you're working for, Franklin Covey, or that it's all, there's these things change, but really at the end of the day, you're still kind of doing the same thing.
That's right. I have a expression that's not nearly as eloquent as you, but I'll just add it into the conversation here, maybe because I know we're getting close to closing. Is there are times when the familiarity of our life makes us confuse the boat for the river. Because we're used to the boat. We sit in the boat. We live in the boat. We can touch the boat and feel the boat. So we think the boat is the universe, but we've confused the boat for the river. The boat just happens to be the thing we're riding in the moment, but it's the river that's taking us somewhere. Well, that's really, that's a way of talking about your life. And to my story is not as eloquent or dramatic as yours, but in the same way, I have to be careful. I don't confuse the boat for the river. I'm on the river. We're going somewhere, right? So I might change boats. I might change paddles. I might change life preservers. I don't know how to stretch this metaphor any further. But I know that there is a difference between the boat and the river. In other words, there's a difference between the thing that I'm in and the thing that is taking me somewhere. And that difference, understanding just what we're talking about there, is another way of expressing why it's so important to do the deep work of asking yourself, hey, what am I here to do? What am I supposed to be doing with my life? I was given all these gifts. What am I supposed to be doing with these gifts? I wasn't given them by accident. I was given them for a purpose. So what is that? So not to focus only on the boat, but focus on the river. Where is all this supposed to be taking me? Maybe is a good question to try to put a ribbon around so much of what we've talked about today. But I think it's what you have done so masterfully with your life and continue to do. You're a beautiful example of there is not one version of me. There's in fact, I'm a believer that every next level of your life requires a new version of you. That I don't think the 2022 model of Jim can handle 2024. I think he's hopelessly lost, right? And by the way, the 2024 version of Jim is not ready for 2025. He's got to upskill in some places and get himself ready, So every new level of our life requires this new version. And that's how we think about it, that we're in the boat on the river, we're going somewhere, and we're doing those things that we feel called to do that enable us to fulfill that purpose. If we could somehow bottle that and everybody have a tablespoon of it, including us, every day, the world would certainly be a different place. But I think we're trying to do our part, aren't we, by getting this kind of message out.
I love this. This was so uplifting. I just feel like we definitely should kind of come close to an end here, because we're just like, the crescendo is here. What my last question to you really is, as we sort of close things out, do you have any last minute thoughts about, I loved that we talked about the work of it. I feel like a lot of times people talk about goal setting, but you kind of leave the emotion out of it, which to me, I don't think goals work without that. And so I really love how you've brought all that to it. So last thoughts for people who were in this journey that we're in?
Oh, for sure. And I'm honored you'd let me say it. I hope you'll have a better last word, even perhaps than mine. But I think when you take all of these very large, expansive things that we've talked about, you have to be really careful to bring them back to, what do I do today? Because otherwise they'll be overwhelming. Like you said, you would cry watching Oprah. What's my purpose? I think we have to be careful that these big thoughts can have that kind of overwhelming effect. So for me, so much of my coaching is about saying to people, for example, you've been very kind to me about this practice, is every morning of my life, I write on a piece of paper 3 things I'm grateful for. And they can't be the same 3 things. They have to be something new. I have to think of something new. And so sometimes I'm grateful for my family and my life and my health, but sometimes I'm grateful for this unbelievable song the wren on my porch rail is singing. So 3 things that I'm grateful for that sets me in the right place. Takes all of about 30 seconds to do on any given day. That's number 1. Only 3 things. The second is I say, what am I excited about today? What am I excited about today? And Siobhan, I just say this with great kindness. If you can't find something in you the day ahead that you're excited about, we have a larger problem. If there's nothing in your day ahead that you're excited about, you are on the path to burnout and disillusionment, because you can't. You have to have a joy point somewhere in your day that you can navigate toward and say, no matter what else I have to do today that I may not particularly want to do, I got that right there. That's my joy point in this day. So you spell out what that is. And then last of all, you say, what are the 3 outcomes that I am completely committed to producing today? And this is my favorite of all the 3 questions. Well, I don't know. Maybe they're all my favorites, but I love this question, because then it means I can't float every day on the simple joy of being grateful and having things to look forward to, because my life needs to be about something as well as consisting of something. So what are the 3 outcomes I'm going to produce? And I just say this again, sometimes the outcome is a work outcome for sure, but sometimes the outcome is I'm going to buy flowers for my beloved, which I've done every week for 42 years. I'm going to do something like that. I'm going to write a note to one of my kids to tell them how proud I am of them. I'm going to call a friend whose child is very ill and could probably use a listening ear and an uplifting voice. I'm going to do something. But I have 3 things I'm grateful for, 3 things I'm excited about, and 3 things I'm committed to doing today, which grounds everything else. And this method, I've called this 3 by 3. And I've lived by it by almost 40 years now. I've been doing that every single day, 3 by 3. And it literally is it's my lighthouse thing. It's the guiding light for today. I might be thinking big picture of my life, my purpose, my destiny, my impact. Those are great thoughts. But I have to bring that back to, okay, Jim, what are you going to do today? Or else I won't get anything done, right? So I love that 3 by 3 has been a really successful formula. And of course, you have been publicly very kind to me about that 3 by 3 method of doing it. So I hope that's a good tactical thing to offer everybody as we close up today.
Great. And I've done gratitude lists for a long time and sort of done the to-do things. But one thing I hadn't done was the 3 things that you're excited about. And when you had me start that practice last year, again, it was kind of in my dark night of the soul. And I was realizing, oh, I'm not excited about very many things right now. And so I really had to get back into my life and look again. And, I was like, well, okay, some of them aren't work things. I'm excited about, a walk with my husband or my cup of tea or my, sometimes the sun on my face. It was just sort of almost getting me back in my life and back in my body. So I really appreciated this practice. And it is very simple, but it was really eye-opening, and it helped move some of my behaviors. Again, I'm very disciplined to do this kind of work, but I felt like sometimes simplifying it made it easier to go to get more reflective, but also move into action.
That's right. So, and you said something so brilliant right there. Please let me squeeze it in before we're finished. You did it naturally and organically. The temptation is to say, well, then these things need to be grand and heroic and impactful. And that's not the case. And in fact, it's not possible. It's not possible to have 3 by 3 things every single day that are earth shaking. It's just not possible. But one of mine for this morning was coffee on the back porch in the early morning with my sweetheart. Now, look how simple that is, right? I like to call these joy points. So as I look out over the next 16 hours that I'm going to be awake, I need to be able to find 1, 2, or maybe 3 joy points. And they are my marking points of the journey of the day where I know there will be joy. Now, there may be joy in 5 other places or 15 other places. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying I start the day knowing that I've got pre-planned 3 points of joy throughout the day. I know they're going to be there. But the key is what you said. They can't be heroic. They can't be huge, but they are still things that bring joy. They sometimes bring huge joy, but they can be the smallest thing. So joy points, 3 joy points in every day. Then no matter what your job is, or no matter how awful your boss may be, or whatever else you're going through, you're navigating from where you are to the next joy point in your day. It may sound incredibly simple. There may be somebody listening to us shaking their head like, oh, gee, but I'm just going to tell you, it works. This is a process that really works. And no part of it works better than this 3 joy points through the day, or 3 outcomes that I'm committed to achieving today. Those things become sort of a recipe for the best spaghetti sauce you've ever had.
It really did get me out of my dark night of the soul last year that I was going through. So I really did appreciate that process, and just the simplicity of it. Like, really is most of the joy in life is those simple things. It isn't the really grand things that I've done some really grand things, but they're nice, but sometimes those aren't even the things that bring me the most joy. It's sort of interesting, right? So,
Well, what
well,
a great conversation. Thank you so much.
oh, Jim, you're amazing. I'm so grateful that I'm on this path with you and your
Thank you.
wisdom. I just hope everyone savors this, saves these little podcasts and listens to, like, writes down all your little tools, because I think it'll be game changing for so many people. And I'd love to have you back on and we discuss
Please.
another topic at some
Oh,
point
please.
too.
That was my greatest hope, that I'd get invited back at some point, have another you and I will talk often, but have another chance in this forum where maybe we can share some thoughts that are helpful to a lot of other people. I would love, you had me at hello. The answer is definitely yes, for sure.
Yeah, I'd love to hear where one of the things if you watch Jim, I hope you'll follow him on social media, especially on LinkedIn. He tells great stories about the situations he comes up with his coaching clients. I'm trying to get better at doing that with mine, because you bring these nuggets of wisdom of what your coaching clients are coming up with and how you help them follow through with it. And I'd love to spend some time where we just sort of talk about some case studies about, like, they started here and how they went here. But, until then, everyone, go check out Jim. I'm going to put in his bio some of the ways that you can reach him and follow him as well. And till next time, you can also go to leapleadersunplugged.com and you'll see our podcast, and you'll see more links to some of our social media where we have more clips about these things. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Jim, for being the best guest ever. And we are so excited to have you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.